everyone, welcome to the show. My name is Amanda Ostrander. I am a teacher-turned-homeschool mom, and this is Raising A to Z, a place where we talk about all things homeschooling, and today we're going to talk about dreaming about next year. Welcome back. It has been a while since I've been able to do one of my weekly official videos. As you may see, there is no cast. I'm allowed to take my cast off when I'm sitting, so win-win for me today. And I'm back. So this week we're talking about dreaming about next year. And it's funny because I just had this conversation with a friend of mine. We were sitting down just before choir a couple weeks ago, and she brought up that she started thinking about next year. And I was like, funny, me too. I always think about next year in March. And she was like, me too. She goes, it's almost like there's a switch that flips in my brain. And I was like, it's funny. I'm like, I don't know if it's because we're both former teachers. If we start thinking about next year, because that's kind of when things are starting to figure out what's going to happen next year in the school system. Or if it's just like the nice weather that comes around that we're starting to like get happy about things and like feel like energized to do the dreaming. Like, I don't know. I don't know what it is that makes us want to dream now, but both of us said that one of our big goals when we homeschool is to be done our planning for next year before summer rolls around. Here in Northern Ontario, summer is short and it is precious, and we don't want to spend it on a laptop trying to figure out what we're doing and ordering and researching when it's beautiful and 25 degrees outside. Like, we don't want to be doing that. So she and I both were like, that's our goal, is to always be done our planning, have everything ordered and everything ready to go before, July, so that we can enjoy the summer. And so maybe that's why we start early, but I've actually heard of a lot of other families who say that they also start early and kind of maybe not necessarily March, but kind of like April, May is when they start their dreaming process for next year when it comes to homeschooling. And I thought I would give you my process and how I do my dreaming for next year, because I think it can be really overwhelming to try to figure out what you're going to do for next year, especially if you're new to the process. Your first time picking curriculum, it's kind of a gamble. You don't really know what your year is going to look like. And then as you go through, you start to develop your own process of how you're planning and picking things. But I thought I'd give you a little inside peek into like what my planning process is. So here is how I start my dreaming process. This is not like the finalized process. This is how I start getting us figuring out what next year might look like. So step one, I do like a revision process. So I'll take some time and I'll sit down with a notebook and start just like writing a few things out. What worked this year? What didn't work? What did we not get through? Kind of taking stock of anything that we didn't get through. Perfect example, I overbought units this year. I have an extra science unit that there is no way we're going to get through this year. Like, no way. It's never going to happen. And so I already paid for it. I might as well use it. So like, I am going to like just float it on to next year. And so I go through this kind of process of just like seeing what I already have, seeing what I want to use, but also like, what worked? Like, did we love this curriculum? No? Okay, maybe we won't go back to that. Did we love this? Yes. Let's kind of like lean in and see if there's more that's like that, or if they have more units or more curriculum, kind of seeing what is working, doing a little bit of reflecting and looking back. Step two, I call the research round one. So this is when I start to make a list. So I look back and I say, okay, we really loved, for example, The Good and the Beautiful. We love their science curriculum. Let me go and see what else they have available that we haven't done. And I'll kind of make a list of things I think my kids would be interested in for next year, or that I'm like, I really want to get covered next year. Write that out and have that kind of as a list. I'll look at what novels are available on Brave Writer. I'll look at what other unit stay curriculum topics companies are out there. I'll do it's like a general perusing. I also keep like a list on the phone of like what my kids have talked about. Maybe they've brought up insects a whole bunch of times this year. Or maybe they were like, oh, we watched a movie and they thought that like ancient Rome was really like a cool topic. I keep like little notes like that in my phone, like just a kind of constant running list. And when it's time, like at this time of year, I kind of pull it out and like put it all like on one page. So we've got the good and beautiful units we loved, these novels from Brave Writer that I think would be really cool. This list of topics we've covered, I kind of just put it all on one page and just have all of my easiest options, topics, everything in one place. That's round one. So that's step one. That's like the first round of research. Kind of like a part B of that would be, I actually tell my kids. I tell my kids that we are coming up to that time of year where I start to think about what we're doing next year. Take some time, think about it, and we will come around and discuss it later. And I'll give them like a week or two to like wrap their heads around it. Reminders throughout. If they say something, because like kids will, they'll just like say something off the top of their head. If it's a good idea, I might throw it onto the list. Sometimes though, they don't. I will say the reason I give them a heads up is because, especially when they're younger, they panic and they just like look around and start naming things they want to learn about based off of what they can see. And one year it was like lights, chair, floors. And I was like, we're not learning about chairs and floors, guys. Like just chill, take some time, think about it. And then when we came back to it, like 2 weeks later, we had much better topics. They wanted to learn about dogs and powerful women and, the history of mythical creatures. And I was like, this is a much better topics, guys. So we start the process early, give them time to like formulate thoughts in their brain. And yeah, that is my like first round of research. The next step that I do, so this is what, step 3, is we have our family meeting. And I like to do it like over tea. I just find it makes it more fun. So we'll sit down and we'll have like we'll do poetry tea time, but we'll keep the poetry part short. And then we'll do like a longer kind of family meeting style discussion of what we're interested in. So I start by letting them throw out what they're interested in and what they might want to learn about next year. So I'll put that on the list. Usually out of the 2 kids, I will get like maybe 2 to 4 solid topics. Depends on the year. Sometimes they agree. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes the topics are very strange and Zoe was really, chairs came up again one year and I was like, we're not learning about chairs. I don't even know how to make a unit study about chairs. But we can come back to that. And it was more like she wanted to learn about like ancient people. She was young. She was like, I want to say 4 or 5. And we kind of like we discussed it and she wanted to learn about like ancient society. So we did do something like that. And she was very happy. But like I let them throw out what their ideas are and they go on the list. And sometimes their idea matches with something that I already have kind of on my list. And so that makes it much easier. So like Zoe was like, I want to learn about koalas this year. Okay, well, first off, koalas is maybe too narrow of a topic, but I said we could do a whole unit study on mammals. And she was like, amazing, right? Like make some connections here. And she was like, that's great. That's all I needed. And I was like, cool. So like that was an easy like tie in. I was able to like, hey, that's circle that unit from the good and the beautiful. We can do that, right? And so we sit down and we discuss like, what are you interested in? What do we want to study? It's kind of funny now because now that I do True North history and we've done a history unit, Alexi is like right into it. And she was like, well, I want to do another one of your units, Mom. I want to do another True North history unit. And I was like, yes, I'm turning you into a history buff. I love it. And so like maybe she didn't necessarily bring like a topic, but she was like, I want to do whatever's next in the history curriculum. I was like, cool. Love that. Let's do it. So we sit down, we have tea, we have cookies, and we kind of like have a dreaming session together with like, what are things we want to do? And I always remind my kids that this is not the final list. This is not a guarantee. We're not, because I'm still going to get final say. Like if you guys offer me 7 science topics, we're not doing 7 science topics next year. Like it's not happening. I like to have a balance of social studies, history, geography with a few science. So like, these are here, they're an option, but we're not going to necessarily do everything that you've offered. And I might throw in a topic that I think is important, and we might do that as well. And they're like, okay. So we have a little family meeting, and 9 times out of 10, we've had a lot, like what they've picked and what we discussed has ended up being 90% of what we've done. So it really helps. And then the kids, they like it because they feel like they had some ownership in the discussion. They feel like what they said mattered, and what their interests were kind of helped lead my year. And so they enjoy being part of the process, and it makes for a lot easier later on when they're like, oh, I don't want to do science today. I'm like, you picked the topic. And they're like, oh yeah, right. So it does help. I think it really does bring in the element of letting kids lead and letting kids follow their interests while still giving a nice amount of like structure and focus. And that's what works for us. Step 4 becomes round 2 of research. And this, I say, is a little more in depth. So usually this one, I will start like making a more defined list of what are we actually going to get through and what is where we're going to get it from. So like I said, mammals. The Good and the Beautiful has a mammal. We love The Good and the Beautiful for science. That's going to go on the list. GBTB, mammals. And I'll start doing that, like kind of compiling a list. If there's topics that came up that my kids, I didn't find a unit for, maybe I will start kind of being more specific of looking for that topic and kind of figuring out and making my list and filling my shopping carts if in certain companies. And then I wait. I'm a big fan of buying things on sale, and I don't like to buy things full price. And so this is the season where I'm like, hey, I really love that art curriculum. I'm going to get on their mailing list and wait until they send me an email saying there's a sale. I'm going to get on this person's email list and check in and see when they have a sale. I know what I'm ordering from this company. I'm going to wait until they do their annual free shipping event. And that's kind of like that's what happens in this like next stage. Decisions are kind of being made. I'm made my carts. I'm waiting, and I'm just waiting for things to go on sale. Pretty much, I have yet to see a company that does not do a fairly large sale between the months of March and June. Like most companies that I know run a pretty big sale in there. The one exception I will say would be Teachers Pay Teachers. They almost always run their biggest sale in August when they do 25% off. So pretty much every curriculum company out there though will run a sale. And so I just sit back, I make my lists, I've got some ideas, and then I'm just waiting for things to go on sale. And 99% of the time they do within a few weeks. So, and lastly, and I will do a more in-depth video on this because it is a much more in-depth process. But the last step I do is kind of like my final planning. What is going to be the final look of our year next year? And there's a lot of facets that go into this. I start kind of looking at what our week is looking like, what our day-to-day looks like. Because I start like, especially, and this comes usually later. Like I'll do all these steps until this last one. This last one usually starts to happen around May, early June, because that's when I start registering for a lot of our fall programs. So like our Girl Guides gets registrations in May, Jiu-Jitsu we do year round. So things are starting to come up, and I can kind of foresee what our year looks like coming ahead. And so later in the year, I will do a more in-depth planning video, and I will start looking at like, okay, day to day, what are we going to be getting done? What do I want to include this year? What's the one thing that I'm going to add in? Because that's the thing that I do every year. I add one little element, whether that is a weekly art lesson, whether it is we're going to be doing creative writing once or twice a week. What is something that I can add that's going to extend their school day by about 15, 20 minutes? That's kind of my goal every year, is to Add one thing that's going to make the day a little bit longer. Add one thing that's going to make the day a little bit longer, so that they can kind of build up some endurance into like sitting and doing schoolwork for more than 15 minutes, more than 20 minutes. And when you do that from the time they're kindergarten, it works out that they notice it a little bit come September, but they don't necessarily, it doesn't hit them as hard. You know what I mean? So I will start tweaking what our day to day looks like. I start tweaking what our week will look like. And I'll also take some time and start planning out like what topics are we doing in what months based off of our schedule, based off of our timing in life. I will put those in kind of like plan out a year long thing. So like I said, that's a much more in-depth video. I will do that kind of come end of May, June, and show you what that looks like. Because it is a more in-depth process, but I'm very excited. I start thinking about what that could look like now, and I'm very excited by some of the things that I've got planned that I would like to add for next year. So I'm hoping to finalize that and then we can talk about it. But that's kind of my dreaming process. And I think it's a very like step-by-step process that's easy to follow if you've never had to like think about what next year looks like. And you can do it at any time of year. Like you can use this process to think about school in August if you want. You can use this process to think about what you're going to do if you start homeschooling in January. March for me is when things click. It's time to start thinking. It's time to start dreaming. It's time to start planning. And so that's what I'm doing now. And I hope that this helps you guys figure out how to make the process easier and less overwhelming for you. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you guys follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Consider becoming one of our happy homeschoolers. They are part of an exclusive club here on YouTube where they get early releases, bonus videos, coupons, special cool polls, and input on what comes next. So if you want to do that, make sure you join the Happy Homeschool Club. And then stay tuned for next week. I will be talking about a much requested video, which is a walkthrough of how the Brave Writer program works. So you'll definitely want to see that video next week. So thank you so much, and I'll see you guys soon.